Hello everyone, it's James from Theresa's Sound World Alternative Music blog page. Now this is something I've been meaning to do probably since the start of the blog page back in January. As people probably know from the name of my blog, I'm a massive Sonic Youth fan, and in choosing the name of the blog, Theresa's Sound World, I consulted one of my favourite albums of all time, Dirty by Sonic Youth, and I just thought, well, I'll probably be able to find a title for my blog here, which I did within the space of about a minute, really. So it wasn't a big, long-winded decision. But Sonic Youth are one of my favourite bands of all time. I've kind of got a joint three favourite bands, and it's Sonic Youth, REM, and pre-Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd. And then I've probably got, who knows, another top 200 or 300 bands. But those are always the consistent ones. With Sonic Youth, I could listen to anything by them and be quite happy. But anyway, I've been meaning to do this blog for a while. It's a film review vlog of this film here, 1991, the year punk broke. Now, I've got this on DVD. It's not going to be a DVD review as such because it has got extras on it, but I'm just going to, for sake of time and that kind of thing, I'm just talking about the main film. So I have watched the extras several times in the past. It's sort of extra live performances and question and answer and things like that. But I'm not going to dwell on that really because I don't want to be going on for too long, really. I want to keep it as succinct as possible. But saying that, this is an improvised vlog, and I probably will go off at tangents. What happens with my blogging is, when I'm doing a written blog, I can spend up to a couple of days doing one of those, or I can just do one within a couple of hours, but I've always got the option of going back and changing things. However, with certain things, like this film, I wouldn't be able to commit it to text. There's just too much to say, or even it's just my mind will completely go off on one, and there's no way I can capture that in written word. So I'm just talking freely about this film. And out of what I'd call loosely music documentaries, this is my all-time favourite. I've only really got two real favourites, this film, and the second one is DOA, A Rite of Passage, which has got nothing to do with the Canadian punk band DOA, but it is a punk documentary, and I have done a couple of vlogs on that film before, and that follows bands such as the Sex Pistols, Sham 69, the Dead Boys, Generation X, etc., and has little snapshots of fans and that kind of thing. But much as I enjoy that film, and I absolutely love it, this film towers above it, really, for me. So the basic premise of 1991, the year punk broke, is that filmmaker Dave Markey is following around Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Dinosaur Jr., Babes in Toyland, and Gumball, all US alternative rock bands, on their 1991 European Festival tour. Along the way, there's on-stage performances, which are intercut with off-stage goings-on, which I'll go into in a minute. You see footage of all the bands I've mentioned playing live, plus there's also a performance of the Ramones playing their song Commando. But that's kind of separate. The Ramones kind of feature a little bit as a kind of nice cameo, really. But anyway, it's really interesting because the bands all hang out together. It's really like, I suppose, just capturing them having fun most of the time, hopefully, on tour, and then the intensity of being on stage, especially with a rabid 90s festival crowd. So we get the performances from Sonic Youth. They're very visceral. They're sort of noisier and in your face than on record. Visually as well, there's a lot going on. I just love watching them as a unit. You know, I've seen them play live before over the years, before they're split, but you know, just to be able to watch it at your leisure is fantastic. I really like the way it's shot as well, the live footage with any of the bands, because sometimes, like if you're watching a YouTube video or something of a live performance, a criticism is, oh, the audio's not matching up with the visuals or whatever, like, you know, that kind of thing. But with this, it's unashamedly not always matched. So sometimes it does match together, but a lot of the time the live performances are taken from one or two or more, you know, more performances, and that's especially evident with one of the Nirvana performances where Kurt Cobain is obviously in a different outfit during the same song. With Sonic Youth as well, there's a sound check which suddenly turns into the main performance. But yeah, going on to Nirvana then, there's a lot of their songs from Bleach and Nevermind as well, but again, very intense versions. There's a lot of the sort of destructive on-stage antics as well of Kurt Cobain and the rest of the band, as like drum kits being broken up and guitars being thrown about, and it just adds to the whole feel of this film. I think with this film, it is, I'd say it's, for me, a feel-good film, because when people think about bands like Nirvana, where there was sort of a tragedy involved, they're often thinking of the sort of negative side of things. And yes, it was, you know, with Kurt Cobain, with his, you know, tragic passing and everything like that in 1994, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. But, you know, you have to watch it and think, at that time, you know, he was very much alive. And there's a lot of things off stage which just show that him and the rest of Nirvana were really just like normal blokes in their 20s who, you know, were having a bit of a laugh. And he comes across as a very humorous character, at times quite a cheerful character as well. And it's just nice to see that. I was on a forum recently and people were saying, put your favourite Nirvana quote. And people were putting, obviously, you know, the more serious kind of quotes that are associated with Kurt Cobain. But I put the one from this film, where he's introduced for a laugh in a scene to Kim Gordon as from Sonic Youth as Kevin Costner, who at that time in 1991, if you were knocking around then, you remember Kevin Costner was in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and there was that song that was in the charts all the time with Bryan Adams in his double denim. But anyway, Kurt Cobain's brought in, and you know, we'd like to introduce Kevin Costner to you, and he says, you know, you guys were really neat. And I just thought, it's just funny. It's and I put that in the forum, you know, I just thought that was great, and lots of people thought that was nice because it just shows that he did have a lighter side. And I was watching, this goes off at a tangent a bit, but I was watching a clip of MTV where all of Nirvana were there, getting on really well, well with the VJ there, the interviewer, he was kind of saying, we've given In Utero, which is, you know, one of their last releases, to a load of college kids, and they've gone away overnight to give their verdict. And, you know, all the band thought it was great, and Kurt Cobain was laughing away, having a good laugh with it. So it's just nice like that, I think, seeing all the different bands having a bit of a laugh. There's other bands as well, Dinosaur Jr., their song Freak Scene. Now, this is hard to explain. I'm sure I'm not the only one. No disrespect to Dinosaur Jr., but they're not my favourite band. They're somewhere in my top 30 favourite bands. But Freak Scene, although it comes from not, you know, my top 3, it is my favourite song of all time. And there's a really amazing live version of that on this film. It's fantastic if you're a Dinosaur Jr. fan. Hopefully you've seen the footage of this, but it is absolutely fantastic. Also, Duscake Boy by Babes in Toyland. I mean, I heard this version before I heard the studio version on their album Spanking Machine, and I actually have more of a affinity and affection for the film version. I prefer it. That's just the way I work, and seeing those the band, and they're dressed like they've just gone to the office. They're in their high heels and black dresses, and just producing this wall of angry punk rock is just so fantastic. Also, this film got me into Gumball as well, who I suppose at the time I wasn't really aware of, but their song Pre is just what we call over here in the UK mad as a lorry. It's absolutely insane, and something to check out. And like I say, I really got into Gumball through that. And that's something else with this film. It came out in 1991, and I've never lied about my musical sort of taste past and all that kind of thing. In 1991, I did like Nirvana and Soundgarden, but that was about as far as my knowledge of US alternative rock went. In those days, you kind of just got into what your friends were into. My mates were into metal and more UK indie, like baggy music, like the Stone Roses and Happy Mondays and that kind of thing. So sort of we were into that, and sort of some of the more accessible shoegaze bands like Ride. And we were into metal and psychedelia and that kind of thing. And it took me to 1992 actually to get into Sonic Youth, when I hadn't really heard them. And then I heard Dirty and was just obsessed with them. So this film came out after 1991, and it just really reminds me of buying it on VHS in my university days in the sort of early to mid 90s, and just watching it to death, really. I think I had 2 VHS tapes of this, worn them out. I've definitely had 2 DVDs of this film. I've seen it so many times. I introduce it a lot to people as well, whether they like alternative rock or not. They have to endure it, but I think it's well worth watching. So there is a sort of lot in this film. There's lots of offstage banter, which I really enjoy as well. I think it's really funny. It's like the whole film really for me is light-hearted. There's things like Thurston Moore talking to these local girls. I think they're German and they don't understand English. He's asking them, what music are you into? And he starts saying about Bros and all this kind of thing. And, in Sonic Youth groups and stuff, lots of people say they find that funny as well. And he also says, are you into indie guitar swing? Now, this little comment, hopefully Thurston made this up himself. I don't know really what the origin of it is, but a lot of bloggers like myself and bands as well, if they're indie bands or indie bloggers, tend to use this hashtag indie guitar swing, and it's like a little in-joke, I suppose, or it's quite a good way of describing a genre. If you said I play indie guitar swing, it sounds really exciting. So it's like little things like that I find really funny about this film. Also, as a kind of a bit of a buff of social history as well, it's just something to say about that, really. Nobody really makes a music film thinking about I'm making it so that someone in 30 years' time can reminisce about it and look back on it. It's never like that. It's always of the now, films like Woodstock or even DOA, that film I was just saying about. It's made at the time, and it's not really thought of as we're doing a history, something that could be considered as history in the future. So there's all unintentional things like for a start, like the sort of settings they're in, the sort of people who aren't really associated with the bands or the fans, just your ordinary people in the street, how perhaps of the time they look, and then also the kind of fashions that a lot of the fans are wearing. Like in this case, there's a lot of people with very long hair. It was in the 90s, there was, obviously a lot of hair, and they might be wearing an undone, what we call a lumberjack shirt over here. It was sort of flannel shirts, you call it in the US if you were watching in the US, with a band t-shirt underneath, with the logo. That was a very typical look at the time, and it's really nice to see that, because that was the kind of look that I had in the early 90s. But also seeing the bands themselves, and sort of reflecting on how influential they all were and still are, the ones who are still with us, in terms of style. Like, notably, I've said about Kim Gordon before in an Inspirational Person blog, I see her as a modern style icon, and in the film as well, everything she's wearing, in my opinion, is kind of perfect in terms of style. Also, around the early 90s, I used to sort of emulate a lot of us, Kurt Cobain's style as well. He was a trailblazer, I think, with his sort of grungy sort of styles. And also Thurston Moore as well. I used to, grow my hair when I had hair, like Thurston as well. So it's just sort of nice to see them at the height of their sort of stylistic influence. But also it's the social history of how the fans act. Now, this is probably me overthinking it, but I'm not sure whether I am or not, because I found that in the 90s, a festival crowd was kind of a lot more energetic and harder, and kind of moshing a lot more and jumping about. And I have a theory on this, really, as I always do with these kind of things, that maybe a lot of, say, grunge and alternative rock fans might have been previously, or at the same time, metal fans. So we're used to a bit more rough and tumble, as we say over here. I noticed that going to indie clubs in the early 90s, there was a lot of moshing, there was a lot of pushing, there was, all this kind of behaviour going on. Nirvana would get paid, Rage Against the Machine, all these bands. But then around the time of Britpop in the mid-90s, things started to calm down a bit, and I remember the Gallagher twins out of Oasis being quite vocal about how they didn't like moshing and they didn't like people jumping about at their gigs and all this kind of thing. And I actually remember going to an indie club in the mid-90s in London, and there were a lot of people dressed like mods from the film Quadrophenia and kind of doing this sort of dancing, and it was really bizarre. Things were starting to change. And I think, sort of fast forwarding to the early noughties, just as a sort of counterpoint, because I was looking at the crowd of the performance of Freak Scene again, like I said, and I think it might be at Reading Festival at that time, and the crowd are absolutely going mad. Now, I saw Dinosaur Jr. At Reading 2005, and the crowd are very static. They're enjoying it, and they're very sort of clean-cut looking as well. And I think the noughties was kind of a reaction to the 90s, where even people who were into punk and metal and, I suppose, emo as well, goths turning into sort of the emo kind of subculture. Very kind of stylized, very clean cut, very almost smart looking. There wasn't very much long hair, and there definitely weren't the kind of beards you get these days going around. And everyone had very fitted clothes and were well behaved. And this is kind of reflected in the Dinosaur Jr. video I saw from 2005. So I just wonder whether there's something that went on throughout the 90s to change the way people acted at festivals. Probably me overthinking, but I think it's an interesting thing anyway to say. But this film isn't just sort of performance and then a little indent and that kind of thing. I think it's sort of more multi-layered. It feels like a kind of there's a lot going on, when you watch it multiple times like I have, you just see things you hadn't noticed before. You just sort of or things you've forgotten about. So I think there's a lot going on. It's probably got as much going on as a film like Woodstock, where there's just so many little bits, so many funny bits. Like little skits about Thurston Moore with his Thurstonitis going off looking for record shops that don't exist and this kind of thing. And there's just a lot of laughs as well. Nirvana, with Dave Grohl saying about they will eat grape after grape after grape, and all those scenes like that. They're just really good fun, and I think it is a feel-good film, really, for me. Little tiny things as well, kind of ground the history, just thinking back to that. I know I've got off at tangents, but I did warn you. There's a bit where Thurston Moore's saying about how everything's a dare, like his music and the tour a dare to his parents, to the Bush administration, the original Bush administration in the early 90s. But he also says about that brief coup that happened in Russia as well. And I just really remember that day because being the bookish swot I was working in the summer holidays to sort of do my A-level history project about communism, and I was writing a passage that morning about how communism is kind of evaporating, and then that coup happened, and I can just really remember writing about that, saying, well, this is changing my whole project, and then a few days later it had kind of just gone. So it's just like stuff like that, little tiny personal bits you sort of pick up on. What makes this different as well to, say, a modern music film, what I've noticed, blogging about modern filmmakers and things like that, I noticed that a modern viewer, if they're watching something that's made today, it's almost like we demand information. So we want to know where a band is, say if it's about a band on the road, where exactly they are, what time it is, that kind of thing, what the date is. There isn't really that in this film in 1991, the year punk broke. I think it's more, you get the impression that a lot of the things that happen, they're out of sequence, and that's absolutely fine. There's no real kind of tell of where the bands are. You have to work that out for yourself. Sometimes a band member will say something like, where they are, or, or you get indications like, you can tell by a lot of the fans might be talking in, they might be from continental Europe, but you can detect what accent they've got. Sometimes the bits in the UK, for someone like me coming from England, you can spot straight away that's, they're walking around Reading Town Centre or something like that. But there's, the actual sort of narrative story isn't really important. It's more about the performances, like the way that the sort of track listing is done of all the bands. It's not sort of done in a chronology, because it would work, but it's sort of better the way it's done, where you just have to think, well, that was probably before that and after that, etc. And it's almost done like a mixtape, and it's sort of fair to all the bands, and it's really well crafted and put together. There's little bits where it goes into black and white. It stays in that kind of video quality that's typical of the 90s, and it would actually be a shame, I think, if this was remastered. It's like if something like Woodstock was put in 4K or something, it would be fantastic, wouldn't it? But only as an alternative, I think. I think that the original has that sort of charm that grounds that film in the time it was made, and I think that it would be a shame if somehow this could be cleaned up. I think it would be missing the point, perhaps. I think it has that feel of old punk. When I mean old punk, I mean 70s punk sort of documentaries, early 80s punk documentaries, and I think that does it credit. And I think when you do get a sort of TV clip from a UK programme kind of sort of put in there, you can kind of tell the sort of difference. It's like, I suppose, I don't know, from the sort of mainstream arena that we all know, something like Friends, the TV show from the 90s, it always had that kind of orangey hue to me, and I think that it kind of made it feel cosy in 90s, and if someone came and cleaned that up, it would ruin that sort of ambience of it. But anyway, I think you'll find some, if you haven't seen this film before, you just be sort of blown away by like the performances as well. Like I've said, they're incredibly intense, and I suspect there's so many people have heard of Nirvana as well. Even like the version of Smells Like Teen Spirit is very very caustic and very different to what you'll be used to if you're a Sonic Youth fan as well. This is an absolute must. But I'd also say if you're a punk fan as well, and you're perhaps haven't explored alternative rock, maybe you're into hardcore punk or whatever genre you need to give this a go, really, because all these bands were influenced by punk bands of old, really. So it's just a really fantastic film, I find. It's got some iconic moments in as well, like Kurt Cobain jumping into the drum kit as well. I mean, sort of like history captured. Sort of sad bits as well, where you think some of these people aren't with us. Your music history, there's a guy called Joe Cole there who was a friend of Henry Rollins, who was tragically murdered not long after this was made, relatively speaking. So, you've got little sad bits thinking, Kurt Cobain didn't make it, that sort of thing. But, overall, I think you can have fun with the band. This was probably shot a bit more like a home movie, I think, and then they just thought, to hell with it, let's release it, let's have fun. I think most Sonic Youth fans, this is exactly the sort of format that we'd like to watch our favourite band in. And what I'm going to be doing is leaving a few links. I think it's unfair of me to leave a link to the whole film. I think that's a little bit unethical and not very supportive of my favourite band. If you look, you will probably find it, but why not go and buy the film? You can get it secondhand for a few quid on Amazon. But I will be leaving a few of my favourite musical performances and a few bits off stage as well, just with the bands having a good laugh. But highly recommended film. And I can't believe I finally got around to doing this. I've been threatening to do it for months. But I hope you've enjoyed my Off at Tangents review. But it is impossible for me to commit anything to text with this film. And I think if I did, I'd end up writing some incoherent novella about it. So thank you very much for watching, and more vlogs and blogs to come soon on Theresa's Sound World. Cheers for now.